Hi. The anti-corrosion protection of the body does not give cause for concern. The galvanization of the metal of the panels is working, and rust deposits give only a reason to inquire about the accident past of the car and the quality of its repair. Vulnerable places are doorways. The paint and varnish covering can be wiped to metal by sealants for 2 to 4 years. To delay this period, it is better to maintain the softness of the rubber by treating with silicone. In the absence of front mudguards, sandblasting removes the coating from the front of the sills. Door stoppers wear out and begin to click after 3 or 4 years. This can be eliminated by replacing only worn-out rollers. Due to the nature of the airflow, the windshield warms up unevenly in cold weather, which often leads to cracks. Fluence electrics are simple, so it does not promise big problems. It is not necessary to change the buggy fuel level sensor in the gas tank to restore its correct operation. It is usually enough to clean the contacts. It is necessary to monitor the condition of the terminals of the rear lights, otherwise, due to poor contact, they may melt. In this case, you will have to change the terminals or contacts of the boards. Interior trim materials by the standards of the class are of high quality and durable. The exception is eco-leather. On seats, it can crack after 3 to 5 years. Fabric upholstery is more easily soiled, but also more durable. And the steering wheel braid on pre-styling copies older than 2013 can acquire significant signs of wear after 50 to 60,000 kilometers. The modified, on the upgraded version, lasts 1.5 to 2 times longer. Gasoline aspirated 1.6 of the K4M series has a tenacious cast iron block and a reliable connecting rod and piston group. Every 60,000 kilometers, it is necessary to change not only the timing belt, but also the alternator belt. If it breaks, it can fall under the timing drive, which will damage the valves. After 100 to 120,000 kilometers, the phase regulator may fail. Also, the cause of the incorrect operation of the phase regulator is its valve with a worn gland. After 70 to 90,000 km, leakage of the crankshaft oil seal, gaskets of the oil pan, and in the places where the valve cover is attached are possible. Air-permeable intake manifold seals may also require additional sealing. After 60 to 80,000 km, due to the deformation of the plastic case, the thermostat may leak. It is better to use an analog made of metal for replacement. Another 1.6-liter gasoline engine of the H4M series on restyled cars has a timing chain drive, which rarely needs revision before 180 to 200,000 kilometers. The motor is able to withstand 300,000 kilometers before overhaul, but subsequently you will either have to install a new light alloy block or sleeve the old one. The piston group is more capricious. An increase in oil consumption after 140, 160,000 km indicates coking of the piston rings. Every 50 to 60,000 km, the electronic throttle valve needs to be cleaned, otherwise idle speeds may float. The right hydraulic support of the power unit often settles before 100 to 140,000 km, which leads to the transmission of vibrations to the body. In the exhaust system, after 90 to 120,000 km, the metallized annular gasket of the exhaust pipe is destroyed. It makes no sense to save by installing a non-original, not only because of its relatively low price, but also because most analogs hold even less. Unlike the K4M motor, there are no hydraulic compensators in the valve drive. You need to set the gaps by selecting the size of the pushers every 80, 100,000 km. The 2-liter MR20DE engine has a larger volume due to an increase in the cylinder diameter and piston stroke and structurally differs little from the H4M engine. But the aluminum cylinder head turned out to be weaker and can crack with unskilled replacement of spark plugs. The operation must be performed using a torque wrench and on a completely cold engine. The cylinder head cannot be repaired. The French 4-speed automatic DP2 is found only on pre-styling Renault Fluence sedans older than 2013 paired with a K4M engine. The box has good maintainability, but low durability. After 100,000 kilometers, there may be problems with the control hydraulics. When jerking or hard shifting occurs, in addition to oil, the first step is to replace the modulation valve. after a run of 150 to 180,000 km. For versions with a machine gun, cracks may appear in the flywheel near the mounts. In this case, it is better to change not only the flywheel, but also the axial half rings of the crankshaft. The 6-speed manual transmission on the 2-liter versions is reliable. After 120,000 kilometers, seals leak. And 5-speed mechanics with a 1.6 K4M engine, after 160,000 km, fifth gear bearing wear is possible, and if it is not replaced in time, there is a risk of failure of the entire box. After 100 to 120,000 km, the clutch master cylinder often leaks. The clutch is not resistant to overheating. The consequences are warping and jolts during the closing process. The Jatco JF011 variator was installed only on pre-styling versions with a 2.0 engine. As a rule, it has a resource of at least 200 to 220,000 km. Subsequently, cones, shaft bearings, a control stepper motor, valves of the valve body and oil pump can give a reason for repair. When the belt is rotated, wear of the cones and the belt itself can happen even earlier. Signs: slippage and jerks when driving. The recommended oil change interval is once every 60,000 kilometers. The restyled 2-liter Renault Fluence received a new design CVT Jatco JF016E. With careful handling, the resource as a whole is not lower than that of the 11th variator. For the sake of cost reduction and economy, the design was lightened and simplified. The JF016 variator does without a step motor, and due to the use of linear solenoids, it has a reduced number of valves in the valve body, but is less maintainable. The active use of torque converter lockup results in a large amount of wear products in the oil, which is better to be updated at least once every 40,000 kilometers, and at the first sign of a problem, the unit must be flushed. A valve body that cannot be repaired suffers from dirty oil. Also, with a run of more than 150,000 kilometers, the belt, bearings, and oil pump may require replacement. The main advantage of the JF015 variator of the 2010 design on restyled versions with the H4M engine is compactness achieved by using a 2-stage planetary gear. In instances older than 2015, there were cases of wear of the input shaft bearing in just 50,000 kilometers. And after 120 to 150,000 km, the sun gear may collapse. Subsequently, the unit was modified. The variator is extremely sensitive to the purity of the lubricant, which should be renewed every 40,000 kilometers where products in the system common to the control and gear parts clog the solenoids in the valve body and the oil pump pressure-reducing valve. Suspension is quite durable. Although in cars older than 2014, anthers and compression buffers of the front shock absorbers became unusable for 50,000 km, there are no complaints about the subsequently modernized parts, and in addition, parts of the VAZ front-wheel drive can be used for replacement. Shock absorbers serve at least 100 to 120,000 km at the same time as the shock absorbers. It is usually necessary to change their supports. Bushings and stabilizer struts rarely wear out before 70 to 80,000 km. Ball joints of the front levers often withstand up to 120 to 150,000 km. The original ones are offered only assembled with a lever, but alternative manufacturers offer ball joints separately and are much cheaper. Silent blocks of the rear elastic beam are changed separately and not earlier than 150,000 km. In electric power steering, a small rack knock may appear after 80 to 100,000 km, but is often eliminated by just tightening the spring-loaded cracker. Rods and tips, as a rule, do not give cause for concern before 100 to 120,000 km. The parking brake cable is prone to souring. The rear brake discs are structurally inseparable from the wheel bearings. If one or the other is worn out, you will have to buy everything as an assembly. On the secondary market, Renault Fluence sedans are priced cheaper than many classmates, although most are not inferior in reliability. Cars usually do not cause serious problems, and the most successful versions are restyled, younger than 2013, with a manual transmission. If you know of other breakdowns or malfunctions, then tell us about it in the comments. Your review can help others when choosing a used car.